Good morning, everybody. What do we have? Tuesday, July 26th, 2022, if I'm not mistaken. Hope everybody's week is off to a wonderful start. The topic that we have today, I just lost it on my desktop. Here it is. Okay. So this is something that was posted a little while ago in the Linchpin private Facebook group. I screenshotted it. I really liked it. I thought it would be a great topic just to address in general. People would benefit from it. So, that's about that. This was on a day that the workout of the day was 7x1 deadlifts. Good old heavy day. Respect the heavy day. Probably one of the most beloved heavy days in the world, right? Who doesn't just thoroughly revere a 7x1 deadlift? And rightfully so. Fantastic movement, fantastic day, beneficial, effective. But on this particular 7x1 day, an individual that we have in the community who's quite strong, by the way, and probably has a deadlift that would be the envy of many people, decided not to go super heavy, all things considered. And he explains why. So this was from Micheal C. This is what he wrote, again on a 7x1 deadlift day. Heavy deadlifts wreck me to a point that it's not worth it, especially anything over 500 pounds. Maybe it's just me being scared to do it, or maybe it's me training smarter, but I just don't want to do super heavy deadlifts anymore, and honestly, I'm not worried or looking to build my deadlift at all. So what I decided to do, instead of doing the 7x1, was to do a 5x5 at 50% of my 1 rep max. Okay. So, let's unpack this a little bit, right? We've got an individual who has a deadlift north of 500 pounds, which, if we took a poll from the audience and said, who would like a deadlift north of 500 pounds, I think a very high number of respondents would answer in the positive format. So that's what everyone's going for. And this individual, though, heavy deadlifts just wreck him to a point, take such a toll on his body, debilitate him for so long that it doesn't appear to be worth it anymore. However, Micheal did something extraordinarily smart and intelligent that I hope is what everybody walks away from this with and potentially applies it to their own life if it makes sense. And that is, instead of him saying, well, I'm just not going to deadlift anymore, because deadlifts wreck me, he identified that heavy deadlifts wreck him, but also knew that the deadlift in and of itself was a profoundly beneficial movement, one of the most functional movements on the planet, a movement that you cannot avoid in life, a movement that will help you whether you're into sports or not into sports, whether you're a regular civilian or a first responder or military, whether you're later in life looking to live independently and stay out of the nursing home. The deadlift is everybody's friend. So instead of saying heavy deadlifts wreck me, I'm not going to deadlift anymore, he made a very smart decision and just modified it to keep that movement in his repertoire and to do it in a way that still provided ample stimulus for him to be wonderfully fit, strong, and capable and propel himself forward, but in a way that didn't cause him grief and discomfort. That's fantastic. And as simple as it sounds, and maybe when I describe it like that, it seems quite common sense, and like, oh, of course that's a smart thing to do. But I think it's easier said than done. I think being at this point in everyone's fitness journey is on a different path, a different timeline, deals with different obstacles, the whole 9 yards. I think if somebody gets to the point where heavy deadlifts are wrecking them, I think it's probably tougher to put them on the shelf than most of us are giving that credit for. So the fact that he did that, I'm extraordinarily proud of him. And so he did 5x5 deadlifts at 275 pounds. So some quick math, since he said he did at 50% of his 1 rep max, is that his 1 rep max deadlift is 550 pounds. He's a very strong individual. Now, it's all relative. It doesn't matter if your 1 rep max is 550, 450, 350, 250, or 150. you could still do a 5x5 deadlift day at 50% of whatever your 1 rep max is, and it would be plenty challenging, wonderfully effective in the whole 9 yards. So what he did was he found a rep range and a percentage that allowed him to include the lift in his life and didn't just destroy him afterwards. Profoundly intelligent thing to do. And let's talk about other ways that if you find yourself in that sort of a situation with the deadlift or with anything else really, why you might want to do exactly what Micheal did and why your fitness will be fine. Okay? And if we had everything, right? If we had a wish list, we could ask for anything that we wanted to, well, what would be the best case scenario? The best case scenario would be that heavy deadlifts don't wreck Micheal. Yeah, I'm totally on board with that. And that anytime a 7x1 comes up, he wouldn't have to avoid it. He could absolutely do it and just train the next few days and feel fine. That would be optimal. That would be our wish list. Life doesn't care about your wish list. Life doesn't care about what's optimal. All of us get dealt different hands. You've got to play the hand that you're dealt to some degree. And so if you find yourself in this situation, making a smart play with that hand, instead of just folding all your cards on the table, play those cards in an intelligent manner, and that's exactly what he's doing. So 5x5 deadlifts were on the docket for him. And the biggest takeaways are, you'll be perfectly fine if you find yourself in this situation. You're still lifting, you're still doing functional movements, and I think if down the road Micheal decides, I don't know, he feels froggy one day, and even against his better judgment, pulls a 1 rep max next year or something like that, here's what I think he will find, is that he will have maintained a shockingly high percentage of his 1 rep max, even by not going near it. Since he's going to be doing higher rep ranges at a lower percentage, I think they will sustain his 1 rep max more than most of us realize. And so if he's not going to do anything below 5s, okay, there's still so much fitness, so much deadlift capacity that he's going to be able to do, keep himself pain-free and be good to go. He did a 5x5. You could also do 4 sets of 7. You could do 3 sets of 10. You're not going to get shortchanged with any of those rep schemes. You go ahead and you could do a 15, 12, 9. Heavy as you can for 15, heavy for 12, heavy for 9. All of these being safely as well. You can throw in the occasional 20 rep. You could do a 12, 9, 7, 5. There's all kinds of rep schemes. Just because Micheal potentially doesn't want to do 7 singles, some doubles or triples, and he wants to say if 5s or higher, he's going to be totally good to go. This reminds me of a topic that we covered on a Linchpin Conversation a long time ago, because we're approaching something crazy like 300 episodes now. But it was a long time ago where I mentioned a buddy of mine who was a collegiate strength and conditioning coach. His name was Stefan Roche, and he told me a story about a master's level thrower. I don't know if he was a discus or shot put or something like that, but he was a thrower. The last name was Powell, I believe, and a profoundly strong human being with the barbell. But he got to a point in his life and his career and how his body felt and injuries and all this stuff that, kind of like what Michael's doing, he stopped lifting super low rep, super heavy, and I believe he just stuck with like sets of 10 and didn't go anything lower than 10s. 10s of squat, 10s of dead, 10s of everything. And the point of it was that he continued throwing, continued just crushing people, because he didn't lose any of his edge, didn't lose any of his explosive power, didn't lose any of the strength which propelled him on the athletic field. And so there is a ton of potential, a ton of benefit there, and it will work just great for you too, if that's where you find yourself at a certain stage in life or in your fitness journey. So you'll be good to go. Do what's right for you. Let's get crazy and just talk about some other things, right? Because people think if I stopped lifting heavy, the world would end. I'm here to tell you, I also know more than one games level athlete that has changed their tune later in life and avoids heavy weights just because of the throttling they've put their body to earlier on in their training career. And guess what? They're all fine. They're all fine. Now, I didn't say that they stopped lifting. I didn't say that they stopped pushing themselves. All I said is, depending upon what you have done to your body, the dents that you have in your fender, the scars you've got in your body, whatever you happen to have, making the appropriate decisions for where you are will safeguard your fitness probably more than you realize and allow you to train for years to come. And that's the goal. And so let's say that heavy squats didn't treat you well. Just below parallel was not your friend for whatever reason. So let's say that whenever you wanted to build some below parallel strength, this is an overly simplified example, grabbed a pair of 50-pound dumbbells for the men, pair of 35s for women, and you just did walking lunges with the dumbbells in the hang, so that you're building up some grip strength as well. And that's all you did, just dumbbell walking lunges. And you did it with that modest pair of 50s or 35s until you could do 50 meters of lunging unbroken. And then I checked back in with you a year later or so, and you could lunge 75 meters without putting them down. I checked back in with you a year or two later, and you were just a raging psychopath, and you could lunge 100 meters holding those dumbbells non-stop. I don't know what your 1 rep max back squat would be under those circumstances. I can say with the utmost confidence that regardless of what your 1 rep back squat was or was not, if you developed that dumbbell lunging capacity, I can't think of anything in the real world on planet Earth that you would need more capable legs for, shy of a powerlifting meet. But you're obviously not going to a powerlifting meet because squatting heavy doesn't make you feel good. So hopefully that, just kind of helps people paint a point there. And we could play the same game with a whole bunch of other movements, not necessarily just if heavy lifting or heavy squats or heavy deadlift happen to wreck you. Let's say you're at the point in your life where chest to bar pull-ups don't feel good. Well, I would say don't do chest to bar pull-ups then. And I hate to say it is actually that simple. There's nothing that just doing chin over bar pull-ups won't serve you well for the rest of your life. You don't have to do chest to bar pull-ups, and just because it's quote unquote in the prescribed workout, who cares? Who cares? Just do regular chin over the bar pull-ups. You're still doing pull-ups, still doing a wonderful gymnastics movement, a functional movement. You're going to be totally good to go. So just don't do them. You'll be fine. What if butterfly pull-ups don't treat your shoulders well anymore? Don't do butterfly pull-ups. Do the old school gymnastic style C-kip pull-up. Your Fran will be slower. Who cares? You're still doing Fran. You're still doing whatever the workout happens to be. You're going to be good to go. If butterfly pull-ups don't treat you well, don't do butterfly pull-ups. What if just kipping in general doesn't treat you well? Gasp, shock in the CrossFit world, right? Well then, don't kip. I know that's crazy, but it's going to slow me down in the workouts. I'm going to see my name just fall down the leaderboard. And again, it's easy for me to sit here and say, who cares? But the truth is, who cares? If kipping doesn't treat you well, you shouldn't do it. So replace it with strict pull-ups. And if your strict pull-up capacity isn't quite there yet, that's okay. Replace it with ring rows. Everyone needs more ring rows in their life. They're phenomenal. They're infinitely scalable. Everyone knows I have a wild love affair with ring rows. They're fantastic because you just, in an instant, change the angle of your body and you can barely be leaning back and do a set of 40 ring rows, no worries. Or you can angle your body all the way back to parallel, put your feet up on a box so that you're literally parallel with the ground, and you can make ring rows more challenging than strict dead hang pull-ups. So with just a simple set of rings, you have an upper body pulling movement that you can make so easy that you could get more numbers in one set than you ever did kipping, or you can make them harder than strict pull-ups and everything in between. So you can find a sweet spot for any workout to make it appropriately challenging without doing pull-ups, without doing chest to bar, and you're pulling the rings to your chest, and without kipping. You're solid. You're good to go. Or maybe you could take a band, even though we generally associate using a band with somebody learning to get pull-ups, still working towards pull-ups. Bands could be fantastic. So maybe if you didn't want to go the ring row route, you had some strict pull-ups, but you didn't have enough to do, I don't know, let's say the workout was Angie that starts off with 100 pull-ups. There's a big chunk of pull-ups, right? You're like, okay, well, I'm not kipping anymore. I don't want to do ring rows. I got strict pull-ups. But after doing 5 sets of 5 strict pull-ups. I still got 75 pull-ups left in Angie. I'm going to be here for 4 hours. No worries. Do your 5 sets of 5 strict pull-ups, then throw the band over the bar. Not a band that gives you more resistance than you need and that sends you into orbit like you're on a space mission, but a band that just gives you enough assistance that you can do a bunch of challenging sets of 7 to 10 pull-ups. You're good to go. You're doing strict pull-ups with the band, but just enough assistance to make it really hard. You're totally good to go. There's a way to make that happen, and all of this ties back to that same general idea of I'm at some stage in my life, I'm at some stage of my fitness journey, I've had some old sports injury, whatever it is. I hate to admit it, but I've finally identified that movement A, B, C, or D doesn't treat me well anymore. I need to find an intelligent way to come as close to that stimulus as I can, preserve as much as I can, but in a way that doesn't make my body feel terrible so that I can continue to work out for years and decades. That's the goal, that's the point, and it's literally possible with any darn movement. So that's pull-ups. So handstand push-ups are a big one. My wife was a Division I gymnast, profoundly capable of gymnastics movements, went to the games twice. She doesn't do kipping handstand push-ups anymore, period, really at all. And she doesn't even do a ton of handstand push-ups anymore. Every now and then if they happen to come up, but she kind of avoids them. They don't feel good for her. But if she does them strict. And her time's slower because she does them all strict. Who cares? She feels good the next day. That's more important. You could play the same game with overhead squat, with snatching, with running, whatever it is. Running doesn't feel good. Running's phenomenal. I wish everybody could run for as long as they wanted to, but if it doesn't treat you well, you can bike or row. It's certainly better than nothing. So that's it. I play this game all the time with myself. I've been very vocal and honest about having just a lot of pain overhead from various injuries that I've had unrelated to CrossFit, but it significantly hampers my overhead position, and so I press in other directions. And I know it's not optimal. I know that I would be better if I had the ability to go overhead regularly. But if that causes me significant pain, that's not an intelligent thing to do, so I'll do pressing in other directions. I'll do push-ups and ring dips and dumbbell bench press or whatever it happens to be. I'll press in a different direction. And I would rather go overhead, but for me, sometimes it's just not in the cards. And so you got to make those decisions. So that's it. If you've got something going on, get that ego out of the way, ID the problem, find what's the closest replication you can do that preserves as much of the stimulus as possible, that makes you pain-free so that you continue to train, and go ahead and embrace that. Drive on. Scaling is cool. So that's it. Thanks to Micheal C. for kind of sparking this in my head. I hope everybody benefited from it. Today's workout is Nancy, classic CrossFit workout. And in keeping with what I just said there, I haven't done Nancy yet today, but when I warm up, I'll see how my overhead position feels today. And if it feels good, I'll overhead squat. And I'm not going to blow anyone's doors off the water with Nancy because overhead's just not going to be anything I'm strong at. I'm going to have to put the bar down probably more frequently than most people. But I'm also willing and don't care that if my overhead position doesn't feel great today, I'll either lower the loading or I just won't do overhead squats. It'll be a front squat Nancy for me. And I'll be okay. Life will drive on. Fitness will be achieved. So that's it. Have a great day, everybody. Thanks for being awesome, and we will talk more later.